Hey, everybody, good afternoon and good morning. And happy to be with you today talking about ways to keep your kids safe online. So, we're going to talk a little bit about uh, uh, a couple of different types of concerns, categories of concerns have bad guys, malicious and adult content, and certainly challenges that may come up as your kids make mistakes and come across normal types of issues that they would when playing around on computers and the internet. And then we'll give you some resources to invest in. Uh, as Zena said, this is a passionate topic. For me, I have a 8-year-old and a 5-year-old here at home. My wife is a high school teacher in a public school, and so we spend a lot of time talking about how to keep our kids, my wife's students, safe when interacting with technology. How many of you got that immediate sense of anxiety or dread when confronted with the thought of, man, during this pandemic, my kids are going to need to spend a lot more time in front of the computer for school? I know I did, and I think that's a pretty common reaction. There are plenty of real concerns to exposing our kids to the internet, right? It can be a valuable resource. I certainly grew up on it. That's why I have a career in the field that I do. But it can also be extremely risky and the source of some pretty awful stuff. Fortunately, my I think what I want to assure you of today is that with the right approach and the right controls in place, your kids can safely use the internet and attend virtual school. And I want to really, again, focus on three real distinct areas: internet bad guys, malicious and adult content, and challenges that they're going to come across on their own. And I want to note that everything that I'm going to talk about today, um, we're going to talk about a series of controls that you can put in place. These are not set it and forget it tools. Again, a person who has been figuring out how to tamper with security controls and break into computers and make them do things they weren't intended to do for most of my life. I'll tell you that kids can find ways to circumvent security controls, especially if they are unsupervised. So as much as you are able, you're going to want to be periodically checking in to make sure that your controls are still in place and still effective, right? Your supervision is going to be required for all of this. So let's start. What do we mean by internet bad guys? So these are individuals, criminals, hacktivists, thieves who want to use the internet to steal and to cause damage. These are human beings and also humans who use malicious code to achieve their goals. Now, I spend most of my day telling our business customers how to protect themselves against these threats. And a lot of those same lessons can apply here to us. Um, you know, Traditionally, bad guys, attackers, they want to start breaking into a device, right, a computer or a phone, something else, by exploiting some kind of a flaw in its software, like a vulnerability is what we refer to there. The creators of the hardware and software that we use day in and day out fix these vulnerabilities with updates and patches and things like that. So while it can be disruptive at times, to see these things pop up, it always seems like it's in the middle of something important that we're doing on the computer. It's very important to go and install them. It's funny. A lot of times I'll pick up my wife's phone and it'll be buzzing, and I'm going to see, hey, is she have an alarm going off or something? And it'll be sitting on the kitchen counter, and I'll look and see like that, update is awaiting to install, and I'm like, this has been sitting on here for like 2 weeks, and she's been married to me a long time, and so I try not to bug her all that much about it. Sometimes I'll just swoop in and install it for her. I'm kind of like Robin Hood, I guess, in that I'm not really. This is an essential way to keep your devices protected from attack, and it's really easy to overlook it. But I want to urge you, don't ignore these on your machines, on your kids' devices. Install them as soon as you see them. Get it over with and continue on with what you're doing. You want to teach your kids to install these things or to ask you for help in doing it. It is absolutely one of the most essential ways to protect your devices from attack. Next, let's talk about passwords. This is always a fun topic. You've heard that complex passwords are the best, crazy combinations of letters and numbers that you're never going to remember. I want to tell you that the thinking on that has changed over the years. What we've learned in the industry is that complex passwords aren't actually better. Bad guys have an easier time of cracking or guessing a complex but short password than they do with an easy to remember but very long password. So we advocate for passwords that are very, very long. Really, we advocate for passphrases now. What's a passphrase? Well, it's a series of words that you can remember, entered in sequence. So maybe that's Mary had a little lamb, or you can't handle the truth, or something similar, right? If there's an attacker, using a tool to programmatically guess your password, called a password guessing attack or a brute force attack, a combination of words is going to be far more challenging for them to crack than just a combination of letters and numbers. We also want to avoid sharing passwords between apps and websites, because if one of them gets breached, the attackers get that set of usernames and passwords. They would use those in what we call password stuffing attacks. They're going to try your username and password that they stole from, LinkedIn.com or some forum that you signed up for 20 years ago on a bunch of other websites, trying to see if it'll work. So we want to pick a password that's unique for every site. And you can also use complex, random, long passwords and use different ones for every site or app. You're probably thinking, are you out of your mind, Justin? How could I possibly keep track of all those? Password managers are great for this. The Internet Safeguard app that we distribute through Cincinnati Bell and Hawaiian Telecom includes an app called Password Safeguard. It's a great password manager. And that's really the best way to track passwords long term, and make sure that you're using different ones for sites, so you don't have to remember them or write them down. For your kids, hopefully you're only going to be logging into 1 or 2 school services and won't have to keep track of a ton of stuff for them. But if you do, it's okay to teach them to use password managers, to use long passphrases, right? Maybe my daughter has song lyrics. She loves to use her favorite song lyrics as passwords, right? And store them in a password manager. Finally, we want to use multi-factor authentication or two-step authentication wherever you can. In 2020, chances are, if you can log into an app, you can use multi-factor authentication on it. You can go into the settings or the profile page for an app or a website and turn it on, and then choose to use either a one-time code that's sent to you via your phone as a text message, which is the easiest to use, but it's also the easiest to steal. Attackers are able to redirect your phone and all the data that's on it if they are able to convince your carrier that their SIM card and not your SIM card is actually registered to your phone number. So harder to steal are fingerprints and biometrics and physical keys. I use a key called a YubiKey for all of my essential accounts. It's a little $20 hardware key, plugs in via USB. I use that for email and online banking, essential things. So multi-factor authentication is absolutely essential. It is challenging, but not impossible, for an attacker to activate your camera, right? So you see little camera covers probably in everybody's laptops. The reality is, it's very challenging endeavor for an attacker to actually, break into a computer or a laptop and activate it remotely. It isn't something they can do in their sleep. It isn't something that you can just accidentally do. So unless someone's stalking you or has a vendetta against you, maybe a nation state attacker is coming after you, you're probably safe from that type of attack. That said, it isn't that hard to cover your camera, right? These little clips are easy to find. Most laptops actually come with them built in. My personal laptop has a hardware switch that just physically turns the camera off, like it's unplugging it from the computer. So it's not that hard. Do it anyway. It's not, going to impact you a whole heck of a lot. And in case something like that happens, honestly, accidental exposure is far more likely, right? How many of us have seen videos in the last couple months of, the dorky boyfriend walking into a room while his girlfriend's on some webcam, like a video conference, and he doesn't have pants on or something like that. That's the type of exposure you're more concerned about. So cover up your camera and teach your kids to cover their camera when not in use. So if you're like me, again, you're concerned about protecting your kids and their devices from attackers, but we know that they don't possess a lot of value, the kids' devices, to an attacker. Attackers are still going to try, but I think you're probably more worried about them getting exposed to stuff online that they shouldn't see. And you're right to do so. There's a ton of it out there. There's a lot of different ways that dangerous or inappropriate or adult material can get in front of your kids nowadays. And fortunately, most of our devices have built-in defenses nowadays to protect them from seeing it. If it's in media, TV shows, movies, games, and stuff, you can actually set content filtering ratings based on or set content filters based on ratings, right? So I can say, hey, on my 5-year-old's tablet, I don't want him to see anything that's over TV, rated G or TV Y7 or something like that. You can filter adult websites or other sites, right? So not just adult sites, but gambling, criminal activity, drugs, alcohol, etc., using a lot of these same features. Screen time controls can also restrict the user from being able to buy or download or install apps from app stores in case you're concerned about your kids buying apps or buying in-app purchases. And finally, you can set restrictions on how much screen time they can use on some platforms, which is really useful. I think my kids would probably sit just like I did when I was their age and play on screens endlessly. And so sometimes you want to actually force them outside. And, that's a nice automatic way to do that, right? To set an automatic control that just switches that off. So this is available on a ton of different platforms. In Windows, the Windows security settings page has a family options area that you can get to. If you're on a Chromebook, the settings for the Chromebook, there's a parental controls button. You can go there and hit setup and set up parental controls on your device. If you're in an iOS device, an iPad or an iPhone, under the settings, there is an app called Screen Time, which is where you configure all this. And then finally, on Macintosh systems, you go to System Preferences, and again, there's a Parental Controls button. So ways to do that for all of those types of machines. Again, I want to note that Internet Safeguard from Cincinnati Bell and from Hawaiian Telecom is an app that's available to employees, as a part of our subscription. So it's got internet safety controls and filters. It's got family rules that you can apply to a suite of devices and screen time controls. It's got a set of tools that can add protection for when you're using known online banking apps or online banking websites. It's got protection against against malware. Stopping malicious code, unauthorized code, ransomware, things like that from running on your machine. It's got protection from phishing websites and other websites that you might go to that an attacker might set up to try to launch attacks on your PC. And again, I mentioned it's got a password manager tool. So really great suite of tools that you can add to your service at your account website on either of our other corporate pages. And it works on all these platforms. Now, in addition to deploying Internet Safeguard, I also recommend adding DNS-based filters to your home network. DNS, great, another acronym. DNS is the domain name service. It's essentially helps your devices look up the internet address of a name like google.com or facebook.com when you try to go to it or when your apps do. A DNS filtering service can stop devices from getting to bad websites. And they do that by responding to a query, like let's say I go to evil.com accidentally, and the DNS service would say, hey, I know evil.com. I know that's a bad website. I'm going to respond with the wrong internet address, one that's safe. And then they direct your computer to the safe address instead of the actual bad one. So the nice thing about these services is that they automatically cover all devices on the network by changing the servers that all of those devices use to look up addresses using their service, right? So anybody that's on your home Wi-Fi, when they join your home Wi-Fi, they'll get an address from that router, and then they'll get assigned a DNS server, and they'll get assigned this one instead of the normal one that they would use, and all of the traffic will then be filtered through that service. This is nice to set up on your home router or modem. Any device that connects to that home network automatically gets this filtering. And this covers devices that might not support Internet Safeguard, right? So Chromebook devices, for example, cannot run that tool. So you could use this tool, one of these, to supplement. OpenDNS and Clean Browsing are two different services that essentially accomplish the same thing. Now, if a device, say a phone, switches to cell service instead of Wi-Fi, that coverage goes away, right? So that's something to keep in mind. That's, again, we're back to supervision. You have to go and make sure that the devices are continuing to use the controls in need. If you ever come to us for tech support, right, you call Sinbel or HT's tech support line, the tech support people may change your settings on your home router or modem back to troubleshooting in case that might be part of a problem that's making your connection not work. That hasn't ever happened with me. I've been using these services at home for a decade plus, and it's been fine. So, but just know that might happen. That's a caveat. All right, finally, protecting your kids from themselves. When I was a kid, I spent all of my time on a computer, which was ancient compared to the stuff that my kids are using. And I still found a ton of ways to get myself in trouble. A lot of them were just inadvertent mistakes, right? I learned a lot, I think, in those years. And so I try to encourage my kids to explore and learn the devices that they're using, learn the ins and outs of them with my supervision, so that they can get comfortable and they aren't afraid of screwing up. They aren't afraid that they might mess up the device or something like that. I want them to be comfortable, know that this device serves them. They don't serve the device. So that said, it's very helpful to have some guardrails in place to allow that to happen. So first and foremost is backups, right? One of the most common security controls. That's essential, I think, nowadays for kids and adults who may inadvertently overwrite or delete important files. Raise your hand if you've ever accidentally deleted something and then needed to rely on a backup for it. I've certainly done it plenty of times. You can configure the built-in backup tools on your device to archive important document files, pictures, music, your system configuration, either to a hard drive that's maybe attached to a laptop or desktop, or to a cloud storage device, if you're using one of those, or maybe using a tablet or a Chromebook or something like that. Most of these devices offer some integration with one of these cloud storage solutions, depending on what platform you're using, right? So if you're on Chrome OS, it'll be with Google Drive because it's a Google product. If you're on Windows, it'll be OneDrive. If you're on an Apple product, it'll be iCloud. Dropbox works on all of them. These all work on all of them, actually. So something to keep in mind, right? Backing up your stuff to cloud storage is really helpful nowadays. Wish I'd had that when I was younger. If you don't consider your devices disposable, it's essential to get a warranty, right? Your kids' devices are going to move around a whole lot, and you also want them to work a long time. You don't want to buy a new device every 6 months. You want to make sure they stay operational, moving between home and school and maybe work. So extended warranties are extremely useful and worth investing in my opinion. I've made use of them more than any other warranty I've had on any other thing I've owned in my life. Finally, let's get into, I want to talk about oversight, which I mentioned at the beginning. Supervision is essential, and so is talking with them while you're supervising. And so, we want to explain to kids, why are we putting the controls in place that we are, right? It's helpful to be honest about the dangers that are out there, so that our kids understand what it is we're after. We're not just arbitrarily setting rules. We're actually after a particular goal of protecting them and putting up guardrails around them, because the internet's a dangerous place and we can't always control everything that pops up on our screens, flat out. So we want to talk about the risks of these practices. Why is too much screen time challenging? Why is spending all of our time in social media instead of talking to people face to face, dangerous to our psychology and sociology? Why is it dangerous to overshare? What are the risks in sending pictures of ourselves to people once they're out of our control? What are the legal issues of all of these things? How might it impact our future? These are great conversations to have with your kids, and connect them to why you're putting the controls in place. Talk about the goals that you're after, and in making sure they can't get to malicious websites or spend money accidentally on an app store that you might not get back. Set clear expectations, right? Talk about the boundaries that you have. Talk about the consequences for violating those boundaries. I can't wait to have those conversations with my youngest son, who seems to want to break every single boundary we put around him. So it's going to be a challenge, certainly, as he gets older and uses technology more. And finally, don't be afraid to leave room for questions. Open, honest communication involves your kids hopefully feeling comfortable asking you questions about why these things are happening. So we've got some resources here. I think we're going to be sending this deck out along with the recording of this this presentation. There's a lot of really good stuff that you can go use. You can get our Internet Safeguard tool. There are some links here. There's a safe online surfing course offered by the FBI. There's some great articles about how to talk with your kids about being online, about challenges that are out there around child sexual exploitation, and what different groups, government and non-government, are doing to try to combat that. Lots of different stuff here that you can go read. Educate yourself about this topic. You'd rather know more than not enough, especially if your kids are spending more and more time in around technology nowadays, just like, again, I think everybody's are. So thanks very much for your time, folks. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking through some some of the questions that we got from our attendees as they signed up. The first one, and I'm going to go through these. These are in no real order of importance, just kind of selecting as I'm going through here. Somebody asked, are there any differences between MacBooks and Windows platforms? I don't know in which context they're talking about, if they mean from a security or safety perspective, in which case, no. Largely, there's feature parity across those operating systems and platforms for everything, but especially in the family and parental controls and safety areas. It's kind of a Coke versus Pepsi thing nowadays, although MacBooks are far, far more expensive than the Windows counterparts typically. So that's something to keep in mind. We were asked about the good security options, endpoint protection tools to load on personal devices. So again, Internet Safeguard offers tools from a company called F-Secure from Finland. They are one of the oldest and most reputable internet security companies. They've been around for a very long time. Their tools are trusted all over the world. Their researchers are top notch. So Internet Safeguard has a great tool. If for some reason you can't use that platform or application, there's a tool put out called Immunet that Cisco offers. Immunet is a free anti-malware program that uses community feedback and reputational feedback to better defend against malware. So there's some good options out there. Also, most of your Windows machines certainly come with an endpoint protection software, but I would recommend augmenting it with something better like Internet Safeguard or Immunet. Chrome OS devices are nice because it's very hard to get them to run malware. They're largely just web browser devices, and Macs can get malware. That's not a myth. That actually can happen. So Macs need endpoint protection as well. I got a question about helping to keep elderly parents, safe in terms of the technology they're using, and how do we, help elderly folks, aging parents and whatnot, use devices safely. I would say a lot of these same rules apply. You want to typically point them towards a simpler device, just like I would with my kids' iOS devices, so iPads, iPhones, Chromebooks. That said, my kids don't have online banking, and my parents do. So you want to continue to encourage them to use multi-factor authentication. Yes, that might sound daunting for folks that aren't all that comfortable with technology, but I promise once they get into the swing of using it, you help them with it a couple times, they'll get there. Teach them what attackers are after. They might not be familiar with phishing, the idea of phishing, right? That attackers are trying to get their information, their username, their password, their financial information, their personal information. And so anytime anybody tries to get that information from you, it should set up a red flag if you did not initiate that transaction, and that they should maybe come and ask you or somebody that they trust for help with that. We got, how do you stop unwanted spam, phishing messages? How do you report or opt out of known phone calls or email scams? I would say for personal email, use a service that filters that stuff out well. I'm a Gmail person. You might be a Hotmail person or a Yahoo or something like that. Spam filters have gotten pretty darn good at filtering that stuff out, but if it's not working, you might have to take that into your own hands and unsubscribe from lists or block things manually. Folks, it's been 30 years plus since email was invented. We still haven't figured out how to unilaterally stop spam and phishing. It's going to be a problem we always battle. I guess I'm always going to have a job. Cool. But yeah, that's a challenge for everybody. Use unsubscribe. Most folks will abide by that. If you're getting too much email from somebody, use the do not call list. Sign your phone number up for that so that you, will not, folks that abide by that list will not call you. Block numbers using your cell provider. My phone, I can tap on a phone that called me and say block this number, and it's gone. Those tools have gotten really well integrated into modern smartphones. Do we recommend VPNs for personal computers? No. I think most of your traffic with sensitive sites, you may have heard of a VPN. A VPN tool, you use them to communicate with the company's network, right? You can VPN into the Cincinnati Bell, CBTS, Onyx, HT network. You probably don't need that for your personal machine because the traffic between you and your online banking site or Amazon or library or other places where you're sending sensitive information should be already protected by secure HTTP or HTTPS, which is what you see in the front of the URL where you see the little lock, right? So that's protecting your data from being eavesdropped, which is what VPNs do as well. The only reason you'd really want to use a VPN is if you're trying to hide from your carrier, from us, from Verizon or AT&T on your phone, what it is you're trying to do on the computer. Or again, if you're being targeted by a nation state attacker. Otherwise, you probably don't need to use a VPN, to protect your internet traffic. Do I need a firewall at home for my devices, or will my PhiOptics modem do the trick? Your PhiOptics modem protects your home network and devices from some network-based attacks. Think of it like the locks on your door at home, right? If someone wants to get into your house, if your doors are locked, your windows are locked, they're going to have to break something to get in. Otherwise, they can't just open the door and walk in. That's the purpose of a firewall. Now, if you open the door and let them into your house, then the firewall doesn't do anything. And that's how other attacks work, where we might get a phishing email and fall for it and click on the link that the attacker gave us. We're inviting them into our home at that point because we are taking action on the attacker's behalf. So the firewall does some, and again, the firewall that comes with your modem will do that job very well. A couple other questions we got about using company devices at home. Are there precautions we should take? Your device is already protected from malware. It's got good malware protection tools on it that our security team have loaded. Leo Cronin and team have done a great job finding the right set of tools to protect our devices. That said, when your device is at home, lock it. Lock the workstation when you get up and walk away. Maybe you have curious kids going and banging on it. Maybe your cat's going to walk across the keyboard. Maybe somebody who's a guest in your home comes and gets curious and starts poking around in your machine. It's probably unlikely, but you want to be careful because that machine's probably got some sensitive data on it, right? So you want to be careful how you handle sensitive data on your machine. That means printouts lying around that might have customer information or sensitive intellectual property on it. You want to not leave that stuff lying around. You want to be careful with USB drives that might get lost or, accidentally left out. That data sits on our phones too, so we want to be careful how we're using it on our phones and that we don't lose these devices, right? Because, attackers can get into them as well and take data from them. So my biggest cautions would be protect the device, make sure it doesn't get up and walk out of your house. Protect it when you're out and about. Theft and loss is the biggest risk we have. Outside of that, protect the data that's on it. Handle it carefully. Don't be wanton with it. Know that if you've got data that's sensitive that would be valuable to an attacker, personal information, financial information, intellectual property, stuff that is non-public for the company, that you keep that stuff, well protected. You delete it when you're not using it, dispose of it, handle it carefully. The last question I believe that we have is somebody asked about not being able to do things on their home network when they are on via VPN. So when they're connected to the company VPN, they can't talk to home devices on their network like their printer. When you can do that, when you can talk to the VPN and talk to home devices at the same time, it's a feature of a VPN called split tunneling. It means that the tunnel will only allow traffic between your VPN, connection and your computer to cross that when it's traffic destined for the home network. So if I want to go to a company site like Connections, that traffic is going to go over the VPN. If I want to go to google.com, it's going to go over my home internet connection. We've disallowed, we the security team, not my team, but the Cincinnati Bell security team, have disallowed split tunneling. Why? That makes it harder, right? Well, it also means that if an attacker compromises, takes over my workstation, my laptop while sitting at my house over my home internet connection, when I VPN back to the company, the attacker can no longer control that machine. They have lost the ability to piggyback off of that connection to get into our home network or into the company network. That's why we disallow split tunneling on our VPN. That's why you can't talk to stuff at home the same time you're talking to your company network. Because we don't want an attacker that's coming at your machine from your home internet connection to piggyback off of that connection and have a backdoor essentially into our company network. All right, I know I went through this quickly. I wanted to make sure we did it in the time allotted. That is all the questions that we got ahead of time. I don't see any others in the Q&A. Anita, have we gotten anything else to talk about?
I have not been able to see any other questions. I don't know if Dan is able to see them?
No, don't see any others.
All right.
Okay. All right.
Fantastic.
Well, unless there's another question that comes up fairly quickly, I just want to say thank you, everyone, for attending today. I hope you found the information valuable. We'll email a copy of the presentation to you shortly, and then also when the video is available, we'll put a message out on Connections and send you the link. So thank you. Have a good rest of your day.